What if the most powerful secret in human history has been hiding in plain sight inside every single religion on earth? Not just one religion, not just Christianity, not just Islam, not just Hinduism or Buddhism or Judaism, every single one. What if beneath the different names, the different prophets, the different holy books, the different rituals and rules and requirements, every major spiritual tradition that has ever existed on this earth has been secretly pointing to the exact same thing? And what if that thing, that one hidden truth they are all circling around, is not a doctrine to believe, not a ritual to perform, not a building to enter, but something so intimate, so immediate, so devastatingly personal, that the moment you recognize it, you will wonder how you ever missed it? Because it has been inside you every single moment of your entire life. Stay with me. Now, before we go any further, I need you to understand something important. This video is not about saying all religions are the same. They are not. Their doctrines are different, their rituals are different, their histories are different. Their claims about God, about salvation, about the afterlife are sometimes radically and irreconcilably different. Those differences are real, they matter, and this video is not going to pretend otherwise. But here is what this video is about. Beneath the surface of every major spiritual tradition on earth, beneath the official doctrine and the institutional structure and the approved theology, there is a hidden current, a stream that runs deeper than any creed ever written, a knowing that predates every holy book ever compiled. And the people who have touched that current in every tradition, in every century, in every culture, have reported back with something extraordinary. The same experience. Different languages, different symbols, different names for God, but the same exact experience. And that experience is the secret they all share. So what is that experience exactly? Because I want to be precise here. I do not want to be vague or mystical or deliberately obscure about this. The experience that every tradition's deepest voices have pointed to is this: a direct, immediate, overwhelming encounter with a presence that is not separate from you, not a God who lives somewhere else and occasionally visits, not a divine being watching from a distance and judging from above, but a presence that is closer to you than your own breath, more intimate than your own thoughts, more fundamental to your existence than your own heartbeat. A presence that was never outside you, a presence that you were never separated from, a presence that has been the silent witness behind every thought you have ever had, every experience you have ever lived, every moment of your entire existence. And here is the secret that every religion has been hiding. Every tradition that has ever existed on this earth has known about this presence, has built its entire structure around it, and has simultaneously, almost universally, made it as difficult as possible for ordinary people to find it. Let us start with Christianity, because if you have been watching this channel, you already know that Jesus pointed to this presence directly. The kingdom of God is within you, not above you, not beyond you, not waiting for you on the other side of death and doctrine and institutional approval. Within you. And the mystics of the Christian tradition, the ones who went deepest into that teaching, found exactly what Jesus was pointing to. Meister Eckhart, a 13th century Christian mystic, described it with words that got him nearly condemned as a heretic. He said there is a part of the soul so deep, so interior, so beyond every category and concept and name, that it is indistinguishable with God himself. not close to God, not near God, not approved by God, indistinguishable. And the institution that was supposed to be pointing people toward this truth put Meister Eckhart on trial for saying it, because this secret, even inside Christianity, was considered too dangerous for ordinary people to know.
Now let us move to Islam, because the same secret exists there too, buried beneath centuries of institutional religion, preserved by a group of mystics that most ordinary Muslims have been taught to distrust: the Sufis. The Sufi tradition within Islam represents perhaps the most poetic and direct expression of this hidden secret in all of human spiritual history. The great Sufi poet Rumi, whose words have been read by more people in the modern world than almost any other spiritual writer, spent his entire life pointing to one thing: not Allah as a distant judge, not God as an external authority requiring compliance and submission from a fearful distance, but God as the very substance of existence itself, God as the presence within every heartbeat, God as the love that is not something you receive from outside, but something you discover you already are from within. Rumi wrote, "I have lived on the lip of insanity, wanting to know reasons, knocking on a door. It opens. I have been knocking from the inside." Knocking from the inside. The same secret, different language.
Now let us go to Hinduism. Because of all the world's major traditions, Hinduism has perhaps preserved this secret most explicitly, most openly, and most systematically. At the heart of the oldest Hindu scriptures, the Upanishads, written thousands of years before Jesus walked this earth, there is a teaching so precise, so direct, so unambiguous, that it makes every institutional attempt to complicate it look almost deliberately dishonest. The teaching is contained in two Sanskrit words: Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that. You, the person reading these words right now, are that. The infinite, the divine, the ultimate reality underlying all of existence. Not a part of it, not a reflection of it, not a distant creation of it. That. And the Upanishads go even further with a second phrase that has echoed across 3,000 years of human spiritual searching. Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman. I am the infinite. I am the absolute reality. Not I worship the infinite, not I am trying to reach the infinite, not I am hoping the infinite will one day accept me. I am. The same secret, ancient beyond memory.
Now let us go to Buddhism, because Buddhism presents a fascinating and unique dimension of this hidden secret. Unlike the other traditions, Buddhism does not use the language of God at all. It does not speak of a divine being. It does not frame the ultimate reality in personal or theistic terms. And yet, what the Buddha pointed to, what the entire Buddhist tradition has been secretly preserving for 2,500 years, is the same secret, just approached from a completely different angle. The Buddha's central teaching was about the nature of the self. He sat beneath a tree in Bodh Gaya in a state of complete stillness, and he looked directly at the question that every human being carries, but almost nobody dares to fully ask: what am I really? And what he discovered, after looking with absolute honesty and absolute precision, was that the self most people identify with, the personality, the story, the collection of fears and desires and memories called me, is not what you actually are. Beneath that constructed self, there is something else, something vast, something silent, something that has never been born and therefore cannot die. And here is where Buddhism and Christianity and Hinduism and Sufism begin to converge on the exact same point. Because what the Buddha called the unconditioned, and what Meister Eckhart called the ground of the soul, and what the Upanishads called Brahman, and what Rumi spent his entire life writing poetry about, and what Jesus called the kingdom of God within you, are not different things with similar names. They are the same thing, described by different people, in different languages, in different centuries, using the only words available to them in their particular time and place and culture. And the convergence does not stop there, because every single one of these traditions, in their deepest and most honest expressions, describes the encounter with this reality in identical terms, an overwhelming sense of presence, a dissolution of the boundary between self and everything else, a love with no edges and no conditions, a peace that surpasses every human attempt to explain it, a recognition, not a discovery, a recognition of something that was always already there, always, without a single exception, across every tradition, every century, every culture. The same secret.
Now let us talk about Judaism. Because the secret exists there too, preserved in a tradition so ancient and so deliberately hidden that most Jewish people have never been taught it exists. The Kabbalah. For centuries, the Kabbalistic tradition within Judaism was so carefully guarded, so deliberately restricted, that rabbis refused to teach it to anyone under the age of 40. Not because it was dangerous in the way that weapons are dangerous, but because it was dangerous in the way that lightning is dangerous. Too much reality, too directly encountered for a mind not yet prepared to hold it. And at the heart of Kabbalistic teaching, beneath all its complex symbols and diagrams and mystical frameworks, is the same secret: Ein Sof, the infinite without end. The teaching that God is not a being who exists somewhere. God is the very ground of existence itself, the infinite presence within which everything that exists, exists. And more importantly, the teaching that the human soul, at its deepest and most essential level, is not separate from Ein Sof, is not distant from it, is not reaching toward it, is of it. The same secret, hidden in plain sight for 3,000 years.
But here is the question that none of these traditions have ever fully answered. If this secret is so universal, if it has been present in every major spiritual tradition across every century of human history, why is it a secret at all? Why is it buried? Why is it hidden? Why is it reserved for mystics and initiates and the spiritually advanced? Why has every tradition that has ever touched this truth simultaneously built elaborate systems to keep ordinary people from finding it directly? Because here is what I want you to notice. In every tradition we have looked at, the deepest truth was not in the official doctrine, it was beneath it. The Sufis were marginalized within Islam. The Kabbalists were restricted within Judaism. The Christian mystics were put on trial within Christianity. The Buddhist monks who touched the deepest states were separated from ordinary practitioners behind monastery walls. In every single case, the people who found the secret were pushed to the edges of the very institution that was supposed to be pointing toward it. And that is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. And patterns always mean something. And here is what that pattern means. Every religious institution in human history has faced the same fundamental dilemma. On one hand, the genuine spiritual experience at the heart of their tradition is real. The mystics are finding something real. The secret is pointing to something real. and that reality is the entire reason the tradition exists in the first place. On the other hand, that reality is completely ungovernable. Because the moment a person directly experiences the presence that every tradition is secretly pointing toward, they no longer need the institution. They no longer need the priest to mediate. They no longer need the approved pathway to access. They no longer need the institutional gatekeeper standing between them and the divine. They have found the source directly. And an institution that is no longer needed does not survive. So every tradition faced the same choice: preserve the secret in its full transformative power and lose the institution, or domesticate the secret, contain it, restrict it, complicate it, make it seem impossibly difficult and dangerously advanced, and preserve the institution. Every major religion in human history chose the institution, every single one. But here is what makes this even more extraordinary. Because even after every institution made that choice, even after every tradition built its walls and its gatekeepers and its approved pathways and its restricted access, the secret refused to stay hidden. It kept breaking through in every century, in every culture, in every tradition. Ordinary people with no special training, no institutional approval, no advanced spiritual credentials, stumbling directly into the very experience that the institution had declared off limits. A medieval peasant alone in a field at dawn, a grieving mother sitting beside her child's grave at midnight, a prisoner in solitary confinement with nothing left but silence. A soldier in the middle of a battlefield, in the single still moment between one explosion and the next, suddenly, without warning, without preparation, without any institutional mediation whatsoever, encountering a presence so vast, so loving, so undeniably real that every doctrine they had ever been taught, every institutional framework they had ever been given, became simultaneously completely irrelevant and somehow more true than it had ever been before. Because the secret does not wait for institutional permission. It never has. And this is where modern science enters the conversation. Because for most of human history, the experiences we have been describing were dismissed by the scientific establishment as hallucinations, as wishful thinking, as desperate psychological projections of frightened human beings unable to face the cold, indifferent reality of a universe with no meaning and no presence and no God. But something extraordinary has been happening in the last several decades of neuroscience and consciousness research. The science is changing. Researchers at Johns Hopkins University, at NYU, at Imperial College London have been studying mystical experiences with rigorous scientific methodology. And what they are finding is deeply inconvenient for the dismissive materialist position. Because across thousands of documented mystical experiences, studied with the same precision applied to any other scientific phenomenon, the same elements appear with extraordinary consistency. A sense of unity with everything that exists, a feeling of sacredness and presence, a noetic quality, the overwhelming sense of having encountered genuine truth, deeply felt positive emotions, love, peace, awe, that are not adequately described by any ordinary emotional vocabulary, and a persistent transformative effect that lasts for years after the experience itself. The same secret, now appearing in scientific data. But here is what the scientists are most reluctant to say out loud. Because the data points to something that materialism has no comfortable framework for. When researchers at Johns Hopkins asked study participants to rate the most meaningful experiences of their entire lives, the mystical experiences they documented in their studies were rated by the majority of participants as the single most meaningful experience of their entire existence. more meaningful than the birth of their children, more meaningful than their marriages, more meaningful than any professional achievement or personal milestone or life-changing event they had ever experienced. And these were not religious people having religious experiences inside religious frameworks. These were ordinary people, many of them atheists and agnostics, encountering something so real, so present, so undeniably alive that it permanently altered their understanding of what reality actually is. And what did they encounter? The same thing the mystics encountered, the same thing Jesus pointed to, the same thing Rumi wrote about, the same thing the Upanishads described 3,000 years ago. A presence, a unity, a love with no edges. The same secret appearing now in peer-reviewed scientific journals.
So let us bring this all the way back to you. Because this video is not ultimately about Meister Eckhart or Rumi or the Upanishads or John Hopkins' research studies. This video is about you. And the question that every tradition, every mystic, every honest scientist studying consciousness is ultimately asking about you specifically. Have you ever felt it? Not in a church, not during a religious performance, not fulfilling an institutional obligation, but in a moment of complete stillness, when the noise of your ordinary life went quiet for just long enough. Have you ever felt something beneath it all? Something that was not a thought, not an emotion, not a memory or a hope or a fear. Something that was simply aware, simply present, simply there, unchanged by everything happening around it, unmoved by every storm your life has thrown at it, silent, steady, alive. Because if you have felt that, even once, even for a single moment, then you have already touched a secret, not read about it, not believed a doctrine about it, touched it, directly, personally, without any institution standing between you and it. And that changes everything. And here is what every tradition agrees on about that moment. Every single one, without exception. That moment of direct contact, that touch of the secret beneath all the noise, is not the beginning of a religious journey. It is the end of a religious search. Because what every mystic in every tradition has ultimately discovered is that the thing they were searching for was never lost. It was never absent. It was never withheld. It was never locked behind institutional doors or advanced spiritual credentials or years of approved religious practice. It was here. It has always been here, closer than close, more present than presence itself, more real than anything the physical world has ever offered as a substitute for it. The Zen masters called it your original face, the face you had before your parents were born. The Christian mystics called it the ground of the soul. The Vedantic sages called it Atman, the true self that is identical to the infinite. And Jesus called it the kingdom of God within you. Different words, different centuries, different traditions. One secret, one reality, one presence that has been waiting for you with infinite patience your entire life. Now, I want to be honest with you about something, because everything we have covered in this video, the Christian mystics, the Sufi poets, the Hindu sages, the Buddhist teachers, the Kabbalists, all of it points towards something genuinely profound. But I also want to be careful here, because there is a difference between saying every tradition contains genuine wisdom pointing toward real spiritual experience, and saying every tradition is therefore equally true in all its claims. Those are not the same statement. The mystics of every tradition found something real. The experiences they described are real. The convergence across cultures and centuries points to something genuinely worth paying attention to. But the doctrinal differences between traditions are also real. What this video is inviting you toward is not a lazy conclusion that all religions are the same and therefore nothing matters. It is something more demanding than that. It is the invitation to go deeper than the surface of whatever tradition you come from, to find the living current beneath the institutional structure, to stop mistaking the map for the territory, and to pursue direct, honest encounter with whatever is actually real, with the same courage and integrity that the greatest voices in every tradition modeled for us.
So, here is what Lost Gospel Keys exists to tell you every single day. The secret that every religion has been hiding is not actually a secret at all. It never was. It has been spoken from every pulpit, written in every holy book, pointed to by every genuine mystic in every tradition that has ever existed, in plain language, in plain sight, for thousands of years. The kingdom of God is within you. Tat Twam Asi, thou art that. Ein Sof, the infinite without end, present in everything. The unconditioned awareness that was never born and cannot die. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. Different languages, different centuries, different traditions, one truth. And that truth is this: what you are looking for has never been outside you. It has never been locked inside any institution. It has never required any intermediary, any building, any approved pathway, any doctrinal password. It has been here, in the silence beneath your thoughts, in the awareness behind your eyes, in the presence that remains when everything else falls away. That is the secret, not hidden by God, only hidden by religion. Subscribe to Lost Gospel Keys right now. Every single day we go deeper into the truths they never taught you in Sunday school. Leave a comment below and tell me honestly which tradition's version of this secret surprised you most.